Hi, I'm Sue Stockdale, Association for Coaching's podcast host. Today I'm speaking to Gillian Jones-Williams. She is Managing Director and founder of Emerge Development Consultancy and is a speaker in the Coaching in Workplace conference in Track 2, Building Coaching Capability and Culture. Welcome, Gillian.
Thank you very much.
Now, to pick up on some of the points that you make in your presentation, you talk about, does a coaching culture really work? How would you answer that? Does it work for every organisation?
It's a great question, Sue, and I think there is a whole variety of interpretations. A coaching culture is something that can take a long period of time to embed, and organisations approach it from different angles. And a lot of the problem is that they feel that teaching managers to coach is creating a coaching culture. And of course, that's such a small part of it.
So what are the other things that leaders in organisations have to pay attention to?
Well, the first thing is not to think of coaching as an it, and I do talk about that in the presentation, something additional to what they do. And sometimes I can see them thinking about, where am I going to find the time to do this? It's much more about coaching mindset and how, on a daily basis, can I look at the interactions I have with my teams and see the coaching opportunities there. That could be a corridor conversation, or it could be a retrospective conversation after a phone call, and in the car when we're allowed to go in cars with people again. There's lots of different opportunities. So it's very much about mindset and other activities as well.
You're making me think there that a leader has to almost reevaluate their identity and what it actually means to be a leader. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. A leader has to think of their job is to get things done through people. So their role should be as coach and mentor to their team. Often what you get in organizations, you get specialists and people who have gone through the ranks because they're very good at what they do, and they still see that they have to do the job and manage the people. And they haven't really made that transition to being a transformational leader.
So it's far more than about delivering results. I think the key word you mentioned there is about through people.
Absolutely. Yes, it's about development, it's about transformation, and it's very much about enabling other people. But it's also about ensuring that they're delegating sufficiently to their team so that they can be strategic as a role of a leader. And if they're not doing that and allowing people to come up with solutions, or they're micromanaging or getting involved too much, then they're not spending time being strategic.
That makes sense. And do you think that all organizations are ready to embark on a coaching culture? I'm wondering whether there's a kind of readiness measure.
Yes, absolutely. I think that there are many organizations who feel it's aspirational, but their leaders don't really have a sense of what leadership is quite yet. They're still very much in management mode. And until they start to move out of that management mode, then it won't happen. And also, they need to have a really, really good demonstration from their leaders at the top that empowerment is the culture of the organization, so that they can understand that that's what is expected. So if they are coaching and empowering their people, but the message from above is much more of a direct autocratic telling style, then it conflicts.
So the change really has to start at the top, and the leaders to role model the behavior they want to see in others.
Absolutely.
So in your presentation, Gillian, you showed us an alignment model which focused on task as well as people. Now, in the changed environment that we're all experiencing due to the COVID-19 outbreak, where do you think the focus ought to be these days between the task and the people, when many of us are working virtually?
That really is a great question, because having my own team as well, I've had to really question my own leadership style during this period, because my team have needed different things. And actually, they've needed a lot more coaching. They're normally fairly self directed, but I think the whole situation has meant that they've needed to talk things through a lot more to help them get focused. And my concern when you look at that alignment model is that when we are released from lockdown, in whatever phases or stages that is, there will be such a rush and focus on the commercial part of business and to get jobs done and get objectives achieved, that even if an organization had made great strides in a coaching culture, they may go back to a more directive style to get things done. And that model really shows us that we have to have a balance of these things. You can't pay attention to one and then get round to the other. They have to be done at the same time, both looking after the what we do and the how we do it.
And my sense from what you're saying, Gillian, is that in your own experience as a leader, perhaps there's been a greater requirement for the people focus during this challenging situation.
I think there has. And being remote from people has potentially made it more difficult. I mean, thankfully, Zoom and GoToMeeting, or whatever you're using, can be really, really helpful. However, I think that we often don't know what people need because we can't glance across at them and see that maybe their body language is a bit different or they didn't seem to be contributing to meetings in the same way, and be able to go and ask those questions in terms of how are you doing, and perhaps coach them through motivational issues. I think a lot of people are losing confidence at the moment. They're perhaps not feeling as valued as they used to be because they're not still getting that sense of teamwork. That people side is so important.
So it's about understanding where the balance needs to be at any given moment using that alignment model.
Very much so, yes.
Now, you've talked also about organisations introducing a coaching culture. And in my experience, Gillian, they all often want the benefits of a coaching culture, but they don't want to make the investment.
Yes.
What would you say to organisations that may be thinking like that?
What I would say is that it's not always about a cost investment, because if you think about some of the other things that you can do, as I said earlier, perhaps paying to have managers trained in coaching is an investment. However, setting up things like action learning sets and peer learning and mentoring, leaders doing reverse mentoring, and all the other sorts of activities that you can do can be done within an organisation for no significant outlay really in money. So it's not just about a monetary investment, it's about a time investment. And that might be where we're short going back into whatever our new world looks like. It maybe people feel that they don't have the time, but it's really important to find the time.
Who should do that within an organisation? Is that HR's job?
Yeah, that's such a good question. No, absolutely not. HR might be there to, alight the process or set up a structure for mentoring or peer learning or something like that. But it comes back to the mindset of the organization. And I think learning lessons is such an important part of a coaching culture. And I work with many, many organizations, big project based organizations, who I think are the masters of lessons recorded. They do great sessions on what have we learnt from this, and they file them away on the computer, and then they go and do the same thing over and over and again. So if managers have that mindset for learning fast lessons during days, during projects, and not just when we finished it and we formally sit down and do that, again, no outlay, but a huge amount could be saved.
Does that resonate with the agile approach to operating in a project that seems to be very prevalent these days?
Very much so, yes. I think sometimes they also talk about failing fast, don't they, within a growth mindset. You can't have that type of culture unless you've got an empowered coaching culture, because the opposite to an empowered culture is a blame culture. And so it's all right to say to somebody, fail fast, but boy, you're going to get strung up at the end of it if you do fail.
Yes, so there's the way that the failure is handled that is quite important.
Yes.
Now, you've brought us neatly onto my next area of focus, which was about reflection. And I think you're talking about that in that approach to how people review. There is often that immediacy of response that people demand in a fast-paced organisation, and more likely as we go forwards, that will be what's required. How can they embed reflection as a behaviour on a day-to-day basis?
Again, a really good question, Sue. And I think that, within coaching and as coaches and executive coaches and things like that, reflective practice is such a big part of how we continue to improve. So being able to encourage managers to do that is really, really important. And I think, again, organizations have to get their messages straight. It's all very well saying, we want a coaching culture, we want you to empower your people, but we also want you to work 60 hours a week and we want you to get this project out. And by the way, there isn't a timesheet number that you can allocate reflection time to. So they've really got to avoid mixed messages and think about how they are as leaders, encouraging, reinforcing that this is important to them.
So it's sounding to me like there's quite a bit of strategy around introducing a coaching culture. There's a lot to be considered, particularly from the top of the organization. How does your organization go about doing that with the clients that you work with?
So it's really useful to consider this. And in the book, which I wrote about coaching culture, I did a chapter which was called Strategy or Stealth. Because sometimes when you introduce an initiative such as this, and it comes down from the top with a massive rah rah strategy, and let's roll this big thing out, this is where we're going to be, it's met with huge amounts of cynicism. So it does depend very much on what the culture already is with the organization. And if potentially you might expect that type of response, starting with stealth, I would call it, with a small part of an organization who would benefit from this could be really, really important.
And would that be training coaches internally or people receiving coaching themselves? Where would you suggest that they start in that small part of an organization?
If you could find a part of an organization where perhaps you had some managers who you thought were very keen to try this, who had the right mindset going there, and that part of the organization was either needing improvement or could demonstrate that by doing this they could really accelerate what they're doing, it might particularly be an area that's customer facing, so you can find measurements easier. Then what you get is the view from the outside of, wow, they're doing well. How are they doing it? And when they then say, well, we're doing this by implementing a coaching culture, then people start thinking, well, I'd like to do some of that. So, both approaches can work, but you really have to think through, just because the leadership team in HR have got excited about coaching culture, how will other people interpret this and receive it?
So it has to be, in a way, a good news story within the organization, creating a pull for others to want it as opposed to a push, we're going to do it.
Yes. Because, it would be a total irony, wouldn't it, to say we're going to create an empowered and a coaching culture, but we're going to tell you to do it. So, it really would be. I do remember years ago, there was a great book that came out on empowerment called Zap, and it's a fairy story about empowerment and coaching. And I worked with one organization where the managing director just bought 200 of the books, gave them to his managers and said, do it. And then wondered why he didn't get an empowered culture. So
There isn't a magic wand for everything. That's what the message there
there
sounds like.
definitely isn't.
So let's think about the reality of today with organizations that are out there that maybe are already implementing a coaching culture. We've all been faced with a new world and an adapted world because of the COVID challenge. How do you think those sort of organizations ensure that that coaching culture is retained as they adapt, or because they may be paying attention to other things when, if you like, we get back to whatever new normal is?
I think maybe that, first of all, managers need to be reminded to think about what's going to happen in the new world. And at the moment, obviously, we have no idea. There's a lot of anticipation that it's going to mean probably quite a lot of restructuring and changes within many, many organizations. Perhaps being able to send them a reminder that, A, during this period, people will need much more coaching and certainly to be listened to, which is, the key coaching skill. And as people go back into the world, that they've got to get that balance right. And I think that, those messages need to be sent out to remind them, because you could absolutely forgive managers for diving back in and getting so immersed in trying to catch up and make money money, that they will forget that if they do coach and manage their people better, that will help them to achieve these objectives. So I think sometimes when people get their task focus filter on, it's almost like blinkers and they can forget to see what's going on around them. This might be the ideal time at the moment to get them to brush up on their coaching skills whilst they are at home by, digging out any workbooks if they've had coaching training, or perhaps going online and having a look and refreshing some of those skills to be ready for it.
That sounds like a great idea. And I think what you've given us in our conversation today, Gillian, is far more insight in addition to your great presentation for the conference. So I do thank you for your time today and your insight. If people want to find out more about you and what you've been talking about on social media, how might they connect with you?
By all means, do email us. Email address is info@emergeuk.com, or have a look at our website. So it's emergeuk.com. I also have a couple of books, as I said. One is How to Create a Coaching Culture. And the second book, which I've co-authored with a wonderful Australian lady, is 50 Top Tools for Coaching, which is now in its 5th edition, which should be published this year. Been pushed back because of COVID-19. And that's got lots of tools in it as well. Always happy to discuss this and to talk about what people could do in their organisations while they're waiting to go back.
Sounds like there's some great reading material there for them if they're stuck at home. Thanks again for your time, Gillian.
Thank you, Sue.